This is American Real, where we aim to inspire, empower, and enlighten you through the stories of our guests. Here's your host, Roger Brooks.
You worked for a bully. I mean, that's pretty common today. What are some of the signs that people don't even realize they're in a situation of a bully manager or boss? And what did you do to kind of navigate through that while you were there?
You know, when you get fired from a job, it's like a death, right? It is a death. And when you don't want it, who wants to get let go of a job? I mean, nobody really typically wants that. And so when I got let go, I took time. When you find yourself interviewing with a boss, all right, there are questions you can ask. There are questions that I would ask now that I teach people to ask, that if I'd have asked him, there's no way I would have worked for him. Like, hey, what is your process for recognition to, recognize, ideas and innovation? I mean, he would have been completely inept.
Let me guess, you're an entrepreneur looking for ways to grow your business online. And you've probably tried everything to grow your business, including social media, SEO, even paid ads, only to find out that nothing truly works. So what if I told you that writing a book that goes on to become a bestseller is the magic wand, and that you can do it in as little as 30 days, 2 weeks, or even over a weekend in some cases? Would you be interested? My name is Roger Brooks, and I'm the founder and host of American Real TV, where I interview world-class guests to empower others through the essence of story. But I didn't get here overnight, and my mission certainly doesn't end here. It's been my dream to empower others through the craft of writing and storytelling. Now, you're seeing this video because I just opened enrollment for my new book writing program, where I promise to take you from page 1 to published in 90 days or less. I will be personally working with you to overcome the same fears and obstacles that kept me from pursuing my dreams all of those years. Simply click on the link below to see how I could help you become a first-time best-selling author. I look forward to seeing you on the inside.
This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. My guest today is David Chapman. You have taken the bold step of restructuring your career, life, and goals around your values and faith. After, as you say, recognizing your path was leading you away from God and your highest potential. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Roger. Great haircut.
Yeah, you too, man.
When you're bringing this in to compensate.
I don't know. There's always what I do is when I go on vacation, I just let it go. But there's something about I have a hard time getting comfortable with the facial hair.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
My kids were recently. I had a full beard and it was pretty. You could rent space in it. And they recently were like, "Hey, Dad, we think it would be cute to get the gray out." And so I let them do it. And they went and got a box of Just for Men. And when it was over, I looked like a wee caricature. I mean, I looked like a paste-on beard. It was criminal.
Priceless. Do you have a picture of it?
No, but a couple of people and a couple of prospects, people I work with, friends saw it. And I was like, I heard enough garbage on it that I said, I just took it all off.
Well, great. Well, I would love to see a picture of that. So maybe you could do it again for us and snap a pic. But
it was terrible.
Look, I appreciate you coming on. And I've been following your content for a while, but before we dive into it, you mentioned something right before you started, and that is that you don't really like these fluffy podcasts, right? You want to make sure that people are getting the real stuff. And I love that because that's why I started this podcast is I like to dive deep, underneath the surface and really talk about the things that matter. And just from reading your bio and watching your content, I don't think we're going to have a problem doing that today, but can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think we'll be good.
So tell me about that though, what about the podcast itself, the industry, what don't you like about the fluff, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, I think people are looking, it comes from that bio. I mean, it comes from having it's not podcasts in general. We were talking about podcasts, and the question was, have you been on it? The question I had, but I don't know if I've always played the game to get on them, because my content is a lot of the times, and even the way I respond to other people's content is it's off the path a bit. And again, I get it. I don't know why, but I get it. Like you're so misunderstood or polarizing, and I'm still figuring that out a bit. But honestly, it comes from that bio. I mean, breaking away of the norms in professional life. I didn't ever set out to be an entrepreneur, but to give some credence to that and some background. I mean, I grew up hearing what now you hear a lot of younger people and Gary Vaynerchuk and other, reputable influencers talk about of, going to high school, going to college, getting a job, working for 30, 40 years. I mean, that doesn't happen. I guess it does still, but it's not. I mean, that's the culture in the generation I grew up in. And so I didn't stick with that. I could have, when I was 40, and I went through a major life transition, years later, and, when that bio was written for me after an interview, after the person that wrote it said, what the F do you want to, where do you want to spend your time, spend your days? It's the light bulb that went off. It said, I don't want to, spend the next 10, 15, 20 years, especially after I'm done raising my kids, doing what I've been doing. Cause I was miserable. I never signed on. I signed on, but I didn't sign on with any thought.
Right.
It's what you do,
Yes.
you do these things. And so back to your original question with content, if it's roping me in, it's not that this content's worse and better, or that it's none of that. But if it's the same old, I just can't do it. I can't, I don't enjoy it. I know it has value. And so another thing is that I don't really think there's much that's original. I mean, everything that's influenced my life came from somebody else's words. It's not that I've never had an original thought. Of course I have, but I'm saying that what we see in social media more often than not is it's lacking the story. It's lacking the edge from someone's life, which is what I value more.
Well, look, I commend you for taking the plunge, because I don't know about you, but I think most people feel like they wake up one day and say, what the heck? How did I get in this situation? What happened? Right.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy to just take the plunge. Tell us a little about how you were able to do that. Did you set yourself up, financially, relationship wise, mindset? What were some of the things that allowed you to be able to actually do it?
Like most people that have a breakthrough, usually it comes, not all the time, but for many people, it comes on the other end of a failure or during a failure. In my case, it was more of after and during. So in 2013, two very painful roads met at the same time. At the same, in that year, I was still married, and we moved from Atlanta, Georgia. It was our fourth move in under 6 years with 4 kids. And that was a blended family. I've been married twice. So, when we landed here in New Hampshire, I mean, I went to work. It was the beginning of the end of the marriage, for sure. In terms of like just the distance and what that does to a family unit. And specifically, I don't want to speak for all women, but, I was just really clueless on how valuable the connection to community is or was for her. Right. And which is why we stayed now. We're friends now, but we stayed in this environment. We stayed in New Hampshire, even though we're Georgia natives. But the other road that met that road was, I went to work for a bully. And so as I was going through the second breakup from 13 into, really late 16 into the summer 17, when I came up for air in 17, is when I said, okay, I've got to address this. I mean, I am dying. I'm traveling 50, 60,000 miles a year. I've got 4 kids, 2 that live with me full time, 2 that live with me half the time. I'm trying to rebuild my life, you name it. And I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur, but I felt called. I felt a calling to leave that position without a position. I mean, every time I had left a position, I always had a job. That's just what you do. I mean, a good career coach is going to say, hey, if you want to eat and sleep indoors, you should have a job before you leave a job. I didn't do it that way. It was a big step of faith. I've got a lot of guidance. I got a lot of guidance and a lot of mentoring it's just a calling. I didn't want to look for a job on this guy's time, but I went in the next week after a ton of butt kicking and mentoring and spiritual guidance, and just told him the truth. I said, look, I'm losing what's left of my family. I'm leaving. How can I help this work? Because I was the second in the company. It was a small $20 million company. So I wanted to leave him in good shape, but leave the relationship the right way. That's a long-winded preface. I never found a job.
Wow.
Because by that point, the values were going to be, look, my kid and my kids first, and when you're over 40, I'm not saying, I don't want to stereotype over 40 guys that are divorced with kids, but when you're a father of 4 over the age of 40, I mean, that comes with certain stereotypes. He won't be able to make the meetings. He's going to always have mama drama. I mean, like all these things that went on. I mean, I interviewed for positions from August of 17 to December until I decided to go into full-time entrepreneurship, but it just never happened because the values of being close to my family, both geographically and emotionally, were first in the interview process. Yeah.
Wow, Michael. And look, I think your story is pretty common out there, right? I've run into people, I've heard this story before, but let's look at a couple of these a little bit closer. So
Sure.
the first one that caught my interest was you worked for a bully. I mean, that's pretty common today, especially someone in your capacity of being very high level. I hear this a lot. Can we talk a little bit about that? And let's help some people that might be in that situation you're in, because I know that's what you do best, is help them through these situations. What are some of the signs that people don't even realize they're in a situation of a bully, manager or boss? And what did you do to kind of navigate through that while you were there?
Well, I'm glad you've got a lot of time for this show because it goes deeper than the original decision. So that hiring or that job selection, if I can say it that way, it came on the heels of getting let go about 3 or 4 months earlier. When you get fired from a job, it's like a death, right? It is a death. And when you don't want it, who wants to get let go of a job? I mean, nobody really typically wants that. And so when I got let go, I took time. And I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to give your listeners, your audience, a little bit more depth into that answer. I took time, and my son's mother, her name is Jamie. Jamie and I spent time, and we talked about what we wanted to do next. And the crazy thing is, I had, by the end of 2012, I had 6 opportunities, 2 of which that would have kept me in Atlanta. And so number one, what clouded my judgment in the interview process with the gentleman I went to work for was I really didn't have my values at home figured out, right? So I included her in the process. We sat down, everything was on a spreadsheet, all of the opportunities. But what I did not have at my own choosing was somebody outside of me and her, a Roger or another man that would have asked me the harder questions. Like, okay, it's like her and I talked about the money and, the benefits and, her goals on what she wanted to do after our youngest was old enough and she could start working and she wanted to write and do some things. We had all that figured out, but I didn't have, by my own choosing, anyone asking me the questions that I really needed to be asked around my own issues and belief systems about money and relationships and marriage and dating your wife and all kinds of stuff like that. So when I went up for that flight in New Hampshire for the interview, I wasn't prepared. Because we were choosing the best financial deal. Yeah. And it wasn't a money issue for us. It wasn't like,
you didn't have to do.
Yeah, I didn't need to do it. So the short answer is, after the long answer is, when you find yourself interviewing with a boss, all right, there are questions you can ask. There are questions that I would ask now that I teach people to ask, that if I'd have asked him, there's no way I would have worked for him. Like, hey, what is your process for recognition to, recognize, ideas and innovation? I mean, he would have been completely inept.
Right.
And incapable of answering that. I mean, I just pulled that out on the fly. But because I was so focused on what I thought we wanted as a couple, what was important to her. I mean, what she wanted to do was she just wanted peace. And I thought it was the next best deal, the next biggest house, the best educational system. So that clouded the judgment. I would have never worked for this guy.
Wow, that's great advice too.
I don't know. I mean, I can give you other examples of questions, but again, that was a root issue that kept me from really. I mean, I got the job, but I didn't interview him.
And it's important to interview your boss, right?
Correct.
Man.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. If you've got options like we did, I mean, we could have stayed in Atlanta. So.
Wow. So, okay, if someone's in this situation, let's just help them through this.
Yeah.
Prepare yourself, kind of take a step back, prepare questions, right? For the boss that you would want to know in the situation of, once I'm in this role, what are some of the things? So you mentioned being recognized for something. What else are some of the things?
What you want to do after you figure out what's important outside of work and you've got that figured out, I think I made that abundantly clear. What you're trying to do in your Q&A is if there's toxicity, you're trying to indirectly in code expose it. Not to so you could, if you get an offer or you can pull yourself out of the candidacy, right? So what are your values? Okay, what are your values? And you shift you build your questions around that. So one of the values I have is I don't really need to be micromanaged. When I work for a boss, if I come to work for you, Roger, once I understand the systems and what's important, I want to come to you for wisdom. I want to come to you for, hey, what do you think I should do? Or if I come to you like, hey, tell me what to do. You look at, I want the kind of boss that says, what do you think we should do? So I'm going to build questions around answers that I'm looking for that are going to build on my strengths and my values and my character around leading people. So one of the questions is, what is the company's process on managing performance? Not.
He wouldn't have an answer, right? He wouldn't have had an answer.
Well, perhaps he probably would have said, I'm kind of inventing this conversation. Well, what do you mean? I was like, well, when we have an attendance policy and, it's time to do, I'm not a real big fan of doing a lot of documentation with mid-level leaders. If I have to, let's just use his name, John, if I have to sit a leader down and write them up because they're not holding their people accountable, there's typically, in my opinion, there's something wrong with me or them. Mm-hmm. Well, what are your thoughts on that? And he would have been like, well, you need to write them up. They don't need to be here. I mean, his demeanor would have changed. Maybe because I went up there twice. I flew up here twice. One for the interview, then the house hunting trip, right? So I had, probably 4 total days of FaceTime over 2 days that I could have asked better questions. Another good one is, how do you, what are your thoughts on when there's a company initiative? I agree that we need to do it, but I don't necessarily, how do you feel about, innovative thinking on how we do it? A lot of mine and his issues wasn't on the what. It was rare. Well, I shouldn't say the what. It was a lot of what issues. But of all the issues we had, when we agreed on the what, our biggest issue was the how. His approach was, if they don't want to do it, tell them to put the keys on the desk. And of course, I'd look at him and say, sure, there's 6 of them downstairs. I can do that right now if you want. I mean, I called bullshit a lot, especially in the latter half of that. So it was the how. What you want to do is draft questions or think about what is your how as a leader? If you're going to be in a leadership role like I was, what is your how on getting basic things done, like the sales process, managing customer complaints, and how you and we were a huge what's the word I'm looking for? One of our biggest metrics was client retention. Okay. Because we closed. I've been out at it so long, I don't have the words anymore. That is a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Right. We went out and we hunted and we closed long-term agreements. Okay. To provide really a service that's a commodity, right? So, people had complaints all the time in all the companies I work for. I work for 3 of the companies in this industry. what is your process to serving clients that call us with issues where it's really a little bit their fault, a little bit our fault, because it's a partnership. I could have asked him a lot of questions that would have brought the differences in the how. I'll give you a good example. He wanted to see results from the nationally held company, the national company I work for, that's later been acquired by a large company. And so I showed him my results. One of the flags that, where I was like #1 for 2 years straight, went to President's Club out of 150 people, right? Great. When I was a mid-level guy years ago. One of the flags was he never asked me how I got the results. Had he asked me how I got the results or I shared them, we would have, because his way of doing it was
so different.
Is why the company never grew organically. Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, I can think of other ways, but think about your leadership style, and build questions around that are going to expose the differences in the Q&A and the conversation and the differences in the how. So you find out if you're aligned or not.
So let me ask you a question, Michael. Did you have the experience and knowledge at that point to even know to ask the questions, or do you know now because of what you didn't do, like because you went through it?
I did.
You did.
I did. I did because of the 4 years earlier, I had went to work for a bully on a 1-year contract. And that one, I ended up leaving on my own terms. It was in Connecticut when we moved from Iowa to Connecticut. And that one was I'm just grateful to have the job, and they're going to, making more money, and I got a full reload package, and I got to sign on, and all of this stuff, this bells and whistles. I'm going to stutter on words the rest of today for sure.
That's okay.
No, I had a playbook, and it helped me on the next position. And I used that experience from 2009 to 2010 to keep me from getting into another bad relationship. The difference was the difference on this one was we had moved 3 times, and it was a relational issue. The issues internally inside the home, inside the marriage, in terms of the connection and the lack of the distance. The question I needed to ask her was, do you really want to move?
And you didn't.
And she didn't. Because I was focused on the next best deal instead of focusing on who and what mattered most at the time. So I didn't prepare. It was all about, okay, well, go get the best deal. It wasn't about go get the right relationship for me and my career and for our home. Yeah.
So I usually ask this question at the end, but I think it's appropriate right now.
Yeah.
If you were to call yourself back then, at that age, at that moment,
yeah,
what would you have said to yourself to kind of shake your, again, trying to help people right now?
Well, it'd be like, so if I was, put it this way, if I was my brother, because I did talk to my brother, and he did not say this because he was like, what the hell are you thinking? But it was a bit of like, cause you're going to move again. You're moving away from the family again, whatever. But really underneath that sort of scorn, remember, me and my brother are fine. But what I would say to that Michael of late 2012 is, why do you not have one man? Why do you not have one man in your life who is unbiased, unemotional to the outcome, who will ask you the hard questions? Because the issue was, at the root of it was, there was a little bit of greed. There was a definite scarcity mindset. I didn't have an abundance mindset. I mean, I moved for $25,000 in a tax-free, $25,000 more a year in a tax-free state, and other reasons that, and then when we found the house, so I didn't, who do you have in your life? The question, Michael, who do you have in your life that you're allowing to ask you the hard questions to really bring to the surface what you really want? Even if they would have said, look, I'm okay with you lying to yourself, I'm saying lying, but just don't lie to yourself. Or better yet, I'm okay with you doing what's wrong, but don't be a liar. Okay. You have an issue. You have a bad relationship with money. And that seems to be more important than your marriage. That's what I'd tell that guy. Do you have somebody that'll ask you that and say that to you?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I answered it, but I tried.
No, look, it gives me the chills because, again, and look, I think you're beating yourself up a little bit because I don't even know you that well, but I just don't, I mean, at that time, maybe you just didn't have the growth yet, the mindset, the maturity of that mindset to be able to even think of that.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel if we look and we connect the dots backwards, sometimes we say, well, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I think it's all part of our journey.
Well, I did a lot of, dude, I was 39. I'm 47 now. All right. That was 8 coming up on, I guess, wow, more than 8 years ago. And I definitely from 43 to about 46, maybe 45 and a half, beat myself good. I can just tell it in vivid color.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you asked me, I'm going to tell you so it sticks with anybody listening. I mean, if you're a leader, and I'm speaking to men, this is not exclusive to men, but there's 2 men talking. I mean, but it applies to women too. If you're leading a home and you're earning bread to make bread for people, it's more than just your job. You've got to think about like the impact. I didn't even think about the impact. I mean, this is not beating myself up, but I didn't think about, we moved to a great school system here in New Hampshire. It's a terrific school system, but I didn't really think about like, wow, my 2 oldest at the time were 11 and 9. They had just lost, because I've been married twice, they had just lost their mother to an accidental overdose a year before. And again, that's just not, again, I'm not beating myself up. It's just, that's a guy, and we can go into this. I was running so fast. I ran very fast from about age 15 to 39. 25 year, just ran very fast for a lot of reasons. But so I've beaten myself up for sure. But no, I'm just telling you because you asked me. Yeah. I have completely forgiven myself, experienced forgiveness with me and my son's mother and family members and people that I hurt. But I can tell it in vivid color.
Have you shared that publicly before?
About my 2 oldest mother, my first wife. Yeah. Sure. Probably not that it's not cavalier. It was horrific. Who sits, especially in that situation where the way it turned out, my son's mother, that was hard for her the 2 of us to sit them down and how it happened. And it's insane when I look back that and this is fair to still say, I didn't take the time to really, we cared for it, but part of caring for it wouldn't have been another reload.
Got it.
And again, it goes back to what you said. Like I had nobody in my life, not other than Jamie. I had nobody in my life by my own hand, by my own doing. It's not that God didn't send people. It's just, leaders need to be tough and whatever. I had nobody in my life that would have been like, man, really? Do you really want to do that? You just had this happen last August. No. You just lost your job. But well, how's your marriage? How you got, I kept that out. It was selfish.
Yeah. Sure. And again, this is a common theme that I see and hear. And, look, I there's bits and pieces of that where I've been myself. So I know, I feel it. So here's the good news.
Yeah.
What is it? 7, 8 years later, man, you are just a powerhouse on LinkedIn. You are a big time, what I would call, you are an influencer.
Oh no.
Like it or not. We don't like that word, but your words matter, your posts matter. People are watching closely. And you have the opportunity to move mountains, which is fantastic. Can you take us through that journey from then till now? Because you've really built up a lot of momentum in a really good way.
Yeah, it was never intended. That day, going back to August of 17, many people have heard this story. It's going to be people have heard. Here he goes again. But it's. You're asking. So
talk about.
I remember it was really literally 3 years ago to last week that I sat the owner down. But a couple of weeks Prior to that, I was on the golf course with a very good friend of mine that used to work for me at the same company, who incidentally worked for that same owner for about 7 years, maybe 8 years before I got there. But he left. We were on the golf course and I was hemming and hawing. I was like, how am I going to leave him? You know, I'm in New England. I don't know anybody. I've just come through this second divorce. I don't have a college degree. I'm 4 kids deep, single. Nobody's going to hire me. And I remember where I was. I remember we were on a dog track of a golf course, and he grabbed me. We were on the 15th green. He just grabbed me by the shoulders, and he looked at me and he said, "Just effing leave." And it was, teeth and gritting and all that. And after one other more spiritually motivated affirmation from another mentor, the next week I gave notice. The day that I did that, I got on LinkedIn. I drove home from south of Boston and up to New Hampshire. I got on LinkedIn. I had about 1,000 connections that I had amassed from 2009 or 8, whenever I got on. And I just started looking for a job. But at the same time, my recovery had happened primarily from journaling on my phone. I'd done a lot of work with a couple therapists, divorce groups, mentors. I even had a grief counselor, which is different than therapy in lots of ways. But my journaling was everything. And I just began to look at the journals and repurpose some of the learnings, failed marriages, getting fired from jobs, lost a child along the way. I mean, you name it, right? So I never found a job. I was looking for a job, but it just took off. And it was right about the time I don't remember the month that Microsoft bought LinkedIn, but it was about a year after they had bought them. And they had listen, up to them, Roger, LinkedIn was a place to look for talent, be found, read a good Forbes article, and maybe look, for a job. And I could see how it turned into more like a Facebook feed where it was more personal stories. And I met some really good friends. Some I'm still connected with, some I'm not, that just showed me a little bit how it works. And I just took it from there, and it just took off. I mean, I remember back in, right now they really slowed it down, but just to give you context, I remember like late October, early November, a bad performing post, text post, 700, 1,300 character post, was 100,000 views. I mean, that was a bad day. Yeah. I mean, but they were handing them out. I mean, they just really slowed it down. And so I just rode with it. And I think incidentally it helped me never get a job. I mean, people just like, we can hire this guy. This guy's got stuff going on. So that's how I did it. I mean, I can go into more detail, but that's basically how it started.
Look, I give you so much credit. I'm happy your friend shook you that day. I'm happy that you got the second sign from the mentor.
Yeah.
And you did it. So I commend you for that. I'm proud of you. And I don't even know you that well, but I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
And I love the fact that you didn't have any intentions on LinkedIn. You just
I was looking for a job.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So guys like me, like I never took LinkedIn serious until about less than a year ago, maybe 8-9 months ago, I started taking it more serious, but I'm still learning. Like it's so, dynamic and changing. And but let's talk about, if you were to coach me or someone who's listening on LinkedIn, what are some of the things that people should be thinking about? Because it's different today than even when it was, say, when you started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
What are some of the things people should be thinking about when they do their posts? What should they do? What shouldn't they do? Give us some ideas if you can.
Well, I'll divide it in two things: job seeker versus not. Right. Okay. I mean, it's still largely a job seeker's platform. It's where it's not the only place where, but I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but I'd have to bet that it's where most recruiters go to look for talent. Or a huge place, or large place to go look for talent. So if you're a job seeker on LinkedIn, I'd argue, and this is for any of your audience that are in personal branding. I mean, to some degree, I don't say it, but with our clients, I guess I do some personal branding because I structure and restructure LinkedIn profiles, and from a story perspective, I just enjoy doing that. But I'd say number one, if you're a job seeker, I don't think you need a personal brand. In fact, I think that's the last thing you need, right? I mean, if you are like me, I'm not saying you got to be, but I'll just give you some numbers. Like by the end of by December of 2017, I'd gone from 1,000 to like 15,000 followers, and I was in the feed once or twice a day. I don't know unless I'm aligning that brand with Coca-Cola or PepsiCo or Home Depot. I don't know if that's going to fly to getting hired or rehired or when you're transitioning.
Good point.
But for someone that's, and I'm not broad brushing. I want to be clear. For anyone that's done personal branding and got a job, I'm just making the point that it can be dicey, because here's the thing about marketing. You don't know what people don't tell you. Your LinkedIn profile is what it is, and it's your story, and it's either a good one or a bad one in terms of monetizing it or getting rehired or hired or whatever. If you're not a job seeker, I mean, for anyone, so I'm not saying people the job seeker, just gotta be careful, right? I mean, we all know the stories. I mean, I did a post, I think this gentleman's going to work with me, but I did a post from a guy who reached out for me anonymously. I had written something that, might have been, that was, talking about relationships and diversity and in that space. And he said, look, I just got fired because of some comments I made. I'm not sure where, in response to, Blue Lives Matter. So if you're a job, I mean, that's branding. I mean, you can agree with that or not agree with it. I'm just saying, you just branded yourself at a time when you need to be okay with the intended and unintended consequences of that. Non-job seekers, I would say, if you are building a business, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, it can break it down into a couple of different things. Number one, I didn't do this. Okay. So this is more people that remember, like, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, I didn't really have a strategy. It was just putting out, I was on the no plan, back to Along Came Polly. I think Jennifer Aniston said that.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. So I know some people, like, I'll just throw out a name, a Mary Henderson, who is like on brand, like all the time. Yeah. If I was paying her, she would fire me because I just wouldn't do what she tells me to do. And that doesn't mean what she's saying is, I mean, what she's saying is on point, right? I mean, if you're going to be a coach and you are helping men or women, let's just say women, in big pharma, e-commerce, and manufacturing, because that's your background, you can't be talking about 5G if that doesn't have anything to do. I mean, you've got to be very careful, and you've got to be on brand. So number one, being on brand, on purpose. Number two, consistency. Mm-hmm. Back to the content, using every kind of strategy. I mean, like long form post, short form post. Of course, there's articles. We'll come back to that. Long form post with a, when I say long form, all 1,300 characters. Short form could be 500. Both of those with a graphic. Those without a graphic. Both of those with a carousel post, both of those with a video, a 30-second video like a Corey Warfield does, 30 value in 30. Repurpose video, which again, people lose their minds over because they're typically more viral than this one will be. Not that this isn't going to be a great series, but
we'll get people would rather out of this. We'll get the best clip and keep it short.
People would rather listen to Denzel Washington than me, right? Or you. I mean, no offense, right?
That's right.
Use every club in the bag and mix it up and be consistent. Number one. Number two, give. I mean, I would say, and I don't want to say I don't have the time. I don't spend the kind of time that I used to, in full disclosure and a fall on the sword. But I mean, my first year on LinkedIn, I mean, I literally spent hours upon hours in the feed, giving to other people that I didn't even know. Yeah, I just
first year of your 2017.
Correct. Yeah, okay. Yeah, especially then. Yeah, yes. I mean, I got hooked. The dope was just intense. And I was coming out of a bad place in my life, and I mean, it was it was ripe for spending a lot of time on social media. But you can't not give anything. So you don't need to go to that extreme, but giving to other people, specifically people that have, if you've got 1,000 followers or 2,000 followers and you're supporting people with 500, that's good. That's good for your brand. And especially for.
That's a really good tip. Sorry to interrupt you. That's a really, really good tip. Can you say it again? Because I want people to hear that.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't intentional, but when I got to 5,000 or 6,000, I figured it out. If you got 10,000 followers and you put a comment, You know, if someone puts out a post and they've got 1,000 followers and you put a meaningful comment on their post, here's the one thing: you can't predict who they're connected to.
Right.
They may be connected to your next job or your next client. And so that, you know,
I love that.
But you're going to, you know, if picking up followers is part of how you monetize or how you have social credibility, which is usually most of the time for most people in the space, giving to people that have less than you is a great way to pick up followers.
First time I heard that, Michael.
Yeah.
So thank you for that one.
Mm-hmm. I would say, I mean, putting content out and being in groups where people supported my, you know, engagement groups where people supported my content. And I don't mind talking about that at all.
Yeah. How do you get involved? How do you get involved with these engagement groups? I'm in.
Well, let me come back. We'll talk on that. Back to the giving, I would say that, you know, the quality of the content, having help from the groups, and back to the giving in the feed. And again, I don't have the empirical quantifiable data, but I know how much time I spent in the feed. Would probably be, for every hour I had on LinkedIn, I probably had 15 minutes in the feed.
Okay.
I remember specifically putting out comments that would outpace the engagement of a specific post and pick up a large amount of followers as a result. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if the comment is germane or meaningful. Yep. And it usually always was. So giving to other people is huge. And then the final thing I brought up that you're asking, you know, how do you get in them? You know, they're again, they're frowned upon, mainly because there's a lot of ignorance around it. But I always liken the discussion to, usually you're invited. You either create your own or you're invited. That's the short answer.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So people that moderate them will look for people that are consistently in the feed and say, you know, hey, have you ever heard of this? Do you want to do this? And you get invited. And you go from there. And if you really think about it, for anyone listening, it's like, I knew it. You know, like I have been like never in the closet about that ever, almost to a fault and almost with a defiance, because I actually took the time to understand it from LinkedIn's perspective on two fronts. Number one, it's right there in their user agreement. I think for the most part, anybody with, you know, any level of education and the ability to understand basic English in this case, the way, because I speak English, it's right there in you know, in 2.5, you know, what's called 2.5 sharing of their user agreement. They basically defined that they've created their platform where people, you know, they want people to share content with one another. It's another reason why you see message chats why do you think they have it where you can have 50 people in a group chat? Like, you know, well, they're not doing that so you share content, but again, they just want us chatting, that's fine. But then, so if you go read the user agreement, 2.5 sharing, that's one thing. But the biggest telltale sign is LinkedIn groups. I mean, long before this wasn't an issue before Microsoft, before they really opened up this algorithm and really made it easy to get attention, especially back in 2017. But if you think about that prior to 2016, what are people doing in LinkedIn? If you go to your local LinkedIn group, that people are sharing content left, right, front, and center. Mm-hmm. And it's not always, you know, a Huffington Post. Right. It's usually their content, and now they take the URL and share it in the group. And they're doing it to share it, but with an intent that, hey, Roger.
Yep. Give me some love.
Can you, right here.
Yep.
Sweetheart. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So, and groups I don't know when groups started, but they were long. They've been around way longer than the non-pod argument came up. So it's just goofy. It's corny. I won't even engage somebody that can't be intelligent about it.
Do groups work?
You know, I don't know, man. I was when I got back on LinkedIn, I was in industry groups. You know, I had worked in transportation half of my career, industrial, you know, uniform rental. I spent some time in wholesale grocery, and like, I don't know why they don't make them work. I mean,
right.
The biggest thing about groups is you never get the notifications, but
right.
You know,
that's what I was going to ask you is, because we started a group, our company did, and it's really, really difficult. We got a lot of people in, but it's hard to get any engagement because no one knows.
It's because if I'm in that group and you put out a piece of there, for some reason, even if you have that, I think there's a setting where you can be notified that just, I think the group, and I heard from years, like early 2018, LinkedIn's bringing GroupMe all this content that was never verified. Maybe they changed maybe it was verified, but they changed their focus. That LinkedIn was bringing groups back. They're overhauling it. I mean, I just don't think it ever happened. And I'm telling you, to me, it just makes sense to make it work. I think it's in part why engagement groups, the proliferation of engagement groups. Yes, people want more engagement in the post life. I get that. But in most engagement groups, there also becomes what people call a community. That's another code word for, you need, when people say how I built my following is I created a community. I get that, but usually that's code for I'm in engagement groups and I'm afraid to say it because I don't want to look, I'm gaming the algorithm. Okay. That's a little shove to people that, but for the most part in engagement groups, you build a chat group too. Mm-hmm. And so people know about people's kids and what's going on in people's
It's a community.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a leader at LinkedIn, and again, who am I to tell them what to do? They've built a great platform, but I would make groups like critically important because I would want people to stay on my platform instead of go over here to their platforms or that platform.
100%.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great insight, advice. And I appreciate that.
Sure.
So how did you start to monetize? Like, let's talk about that part of it. I think most people that are engaged in LinkedIn, they're trying to figure this out. It's not easy.
Yeah.
What can you offer us today about, where do you start?
Yeah. I mean, like at the end of the day, people, it's so funny. The monetizing conversation comes up and it's like, I got stuck in this for a long time. But it really could just, before you do anything, I mean, my approach to helping someone, and I do a little bit of this work, it's not my core work, but the first thing to do is get out a piece of paper or a whiteboard and say, okay, what are my skills? In my case, like, I'll just give you one of them. I help people, I don't call myself a sales coach, but I do a lot of sales coaching because it's an ancillary benefit to what I actually do. When you book time with me, if you're trying to build your business by default, what I actually help you do, part of it is a sales conversation. So, but to make this simple, if I'm a great sales coach, can I do that without having to be in someone's, especially now with COVID, can I do that without having to be in your office or at a Starbucks, and really get really clear about what your skill sets are, outside. And in addition, that's in addition to what you do for your regular day job, if you have a W-2 job or whatnot. But once you understand that, then it's about finding the pain. We know this. Whoever said this, people buy on pain and need for the most part. They buy on intended or expected outcomes. And so you create that narrative. And so that's usually what a coach does. When I was coaching men, and I still do coach men when I'm led into their life. The men that I work with, I help grieve certain issues that have held them down for years.
That's awesome.
Break through and grieve and move on. It's quick. It's 20-yard line to the other side. It's truly coaching. I don't do therapy and that kind of stuff. I never talk about that, but if I did, it would be like, okay, what are those skills? What does that look like? And then let's just start talking about it. There's 3 ways to do it on LinkedIn that I know of. There's ad spend, there's content marketing, and there's direct outreach. That's pretty much right. So from an ad spend perspective, you can come up with a great creative where you can get on camera, and I can take everything I just told you about my life and get it down to 45 seconds with, a destination landing page, and come click and find a better life and become a millionaire and all that kind of stuff. Content marketing is more of what I did without knowing it. I didn't know I was somewhat of a marketer. I think I've been marketing my whole life. I've been marketing my ideas at companies that necessarily didn't want them, which is fine, inside of work groups, and that's usually what get me in trouble with bosses and that kind of stuff. So content marketing, I think that's a smart play. I think it's a longer play than it is the third one, and that is knocking on digital doors.
What does that mean, Michael?
Well, I'm gonna probably have somebody send me an envelope full of ants after I say this, but I disagree that, I disagree around some of the stuff that people talk about around direct outreach on LinkedIn. That is connecting with someone, build a relationship with them, and then at some point it turn into, potential a business opportunity. Yep. A lot of what you see, don't pitch too early. I get all that, but it almost, a lot of that negative energy, because it's when you really think about, and again, I don't know everyone's connection request, but again, if you've got 10,000 connections, everybody didn't pitch to you. Stop painting that, especially if you're a sales coach. All right. And I say this to my sales coach. If you're a sales coach and you're painting that, that's such a small part of that.
Yeah.
It's an exception. Most people don't just connect and then pitch, right? Because most people that you want to do business with aren't entrepreneurs.
We just remember the small percentage that do.
Right.
It's so annoying.
And I'm not saying I've never done exception-based posting. I have. We're on this topic. So,
yep.
So what I'm saying is in my opinion of the three, ad spend, content marketing, direct outreach, and that's really what we help our clients do. That's what I believe we are best at. I think is the best value for your money, because it's private at some point. You're going to get on Zoom. You have complete control on the target. Whereas with content marketing, it's like, if you don't, if you've got, like at one point, if you've got 30% of your connections that are in a geography that are never going to buy from you, who cares if they're looking at it, right? I mean, there's so many factors that go into that. So those are the three ways to do it.
So are you saying use a combination of the three, or are you saying no? You're saying
you could. Content marketing, I don't do a lot of, my team does content marketing for our business, but I don't do any ad spend. It's mainly the outreach.
No ad spend. That's what I was going to ask you next.
Yeah.
You do any ad spend?
I don't for our business. I help our clients create ad spend and creative, and our team will manage it for them. But for our business, we don't. We're actually looking at, for our business, doing ad spend on other platforms, because the specific things that we do are not as saturated on a Facebook and Instagram.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay. One thing you mentioned earlier, I don't want to forget about it because I'm sure other people are thinking about it too. You mentioned articles. Can you talk about that? Because I know you're pretty big on articles.
Yeah, well, I'm actually not. I've only written like 4.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, so that speaks to the understanding of more. I mean, this is everyone's said this 1,000 times, but what most people don't know or remember back in the day, all of 4 years ago, like it's 100 years ago or something. My understanding with articles, and this is before I even posted, was like, if I posted an article, like LinkedIn notified my entire network. Michael just posted an article.
Right.
There's no secret about the reach, right? I mean, if you're getting, let's to make this simple, if you're getting 1,000 views on a post, okay, you're probably getting a fraction of that on an article by contrast, right? In relative terms, it takes a lot of heavy lifting, especially now with so many people putting out short form content, to get somebody to read it enough, or enough people to read it to get the views. I mean, there are some big names that are just by default. The question is, why do articles not get the reach that a short form, under 1,300 character post does? I'm not sure why they did that. This is speculation. My guess is you're going to attract more subscriptions, members, viewership by giving people quick shots to the arm. I mean, like, and so you take somebody like me, where you took dope and you shot it in his arm, and now I'm just sharing more and more and more from my life, and I'm getting more and more viewership. So more people are staying on the platform versus me going on for, and there's nothing wrong with articles. I got friends that do articles every other day. Tim Denning, has got 1 trillion articles on LinkedIn. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's just not been my thing.
Okay.
I'm more into the quick thoughts. I guess I'm a sucker for it.
And I thought you were going to say the opposite. So again, I'm
a fan. Listen, I'm a fan of the people that do it and have made it successful. I just never, that's like That's like if you're a golfer, that's like the 6-iron in your bag. I mean, it's like you play it once every 5 years or something.
That's right. I'm golfing tomorrow for the first time in about 5
Do you play your 6-iron?
Well, I have it in my bag.
You do if you need to get on in 2, right?
That's right.
I get you. Good.
Okay, cool. So what a great conversation. Maybe we could do another one of these because there's so much to talk to you about. I did want to touch on your faith, if you don't mind, because I know that's something you put front and center. It's something important to me in my life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Why is your faith so important to you? What has it done in your life, especially over these last, 3-4 years of your massive growth?
Sure. So, grew up in the deep South, and I guess Atlanta, Georgia, is that the deep South? I still have it. It's in the twang. I mean, my voice, you're going to hear the Southern thing, a little bit of Midwestern, but definitely not much New England. Even if I try to talk like I'm from Boston, it just looks corny. I sound like a poser for sure. But no, I grew up very on the front row of a Baptist church, very, very evangelical. What was it? I've always joked about this, but it always felt like I was saved on Sunday and I was going to hell on Monday. I mean, because like my dad wasn't around. These are all excuses. These were excuses back then, but this is now. It's just the way my mother had me and my brother. I have an older sister too, but she had already moved out or she was married when we moved to Atlanta and started attending this huge church, mega church. And it wasn't a mega church then, but so I grew up like that. So my relationship with Christ, my relationship with God was very as much influence in the Baptist religion, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. Inside of that, I don't want to pontificate a little bit too much here, but inside of that, at least what I heard, because perhaps a lack of a male role model, not to make an excuse, but just to be direct with it, would have been the condemnation. I need to earn favor from God. It was like, okay, this guy, this son of his did this great thing, but then there's all these bad things about me, right? And so I carried that, from 12 years of age till about 39, 40. And I lived that life. And so, at 40, when the second marriage fell apart, it became, it's not that I never had a relationship. I did, but that is all I had, was to double, triple, quadruple down on that relationship. And that's where I really, really, I saw grace and felt grace from my mother and family, my sister, and even in the marriages, right? But that is where there was nothing else to grab onto, no other fixture, no other idol, whatever word you want to use. And that is all I had, was to have that relationship. And so it cultivated from there. I don't know if that helps, but
no, it does. But at that turning point, it becomes more of a direct spiritual relationship, correct?
Sure.
Where you're starting to have different feelings and believe in yourself in a different way and be of service to others and all these things you talked about today, to move forward in your life in a way that was different than before.
Sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Wow. What didn't we cover? I mean, there's so much here. I wanted to get into one quick thing about on your profile. You talk about people that are faithfully unsuccessful. Yeah. I think it's a little bit related to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. I mean, faithfully unsuccessful came from, the person that wrote that, had taken me through an interview process, recorded it and listened to it. And one of the things she said was, one of the challenges I had was when faith values intersected with professional values, specifically doing the right thing, having integrity on financial reporting, and stuff like that. Bringing those values, a better example might be saying no to workaholism. Like there were times when, I just didn't, I remember one position I held, like we wanted managers to clock in. And I just believed that was micromanagement. I believed it was oppressive. I didn't believe it was healthy leadership. I said no to it. it cost me. And I think it came from, I didn't do it rude, but I just disagreed with it. And it was back to that, you're telling me how versus telling me what. The what was, we're going to get better results. But the how was, we're going to be oppressive and we're not going to have trust in the work environment. I mean, that stuff came from my faith values. So helping leaders bring their faith values into work in a practical and healthy way to achieve business goals, but not give up their faith values. That's what that means.
So you're helping people today trying to break through some of these self-limiting beliefs?
Sure. Yeah, they have faith values grounded in certain, in any faith, by the way. I mean, I work with, it's not just evangelicals. I mean, I've worked with people that, Islamic faith, you name it, Jewish faith. I respect all faiths.
I do too.
Because again, wherever you are, if you have that faith, there's going to be, a rub if you're trying to disassociate yourself from for a paycheck or for a boss. Yeah.
100%. Especially with the world we live in today of LinkedIn. It's so wonderful to be able to connect with people from all over the world with all different faiths and respecting those, everyone has their own faith.
Sure.
Awesome, man. Michael, before I let you go, I have one last question and I ask every guest. At the end of the day, you still have a lot of life to live. What are you trying to do here? Where are you trying to get to? What do you want your legacy to be? What kind of mark are you trying to leave on this earth?
All I want, and I said this on the last podcast, it's so crazy. All I wanted to do is be a dad.
Wow.
Because I didn't have one, but a lot of that came from never really learning how to dream. So I've accomplished a lot of that. I mean, I got two graduated, one in school, one that works hard, and then two coming up. So I'm doing that. I'm killing that generational sin of fatherlessness because my dad was gone, his dad died, alcoholism on both sides, you name it. So no, I don't know. Other than that, I don't know. I'm in that weird place where, I don't have any more excuses to not have big dreams. So I'm working some of that out now, but it was to be a dad.
That's so awesome.
I'm okay with I don't know. That gives me a clean white. I got a whiteboard right there. That gives me a clean whiteboard.
That's a good thing, right? Michael David Chapman, welcome to the American Real family. Thank you so much. You have taken that bold step of restructuring your life and career, and I'm so proud to call you a friend.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to share this episode.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into American Real. Be sure to visit our website, americanreal.tv, or search for us on iTunes or YouTube for past episodes. While you're there, please rate us or leave us a review, as that helps others find our show. I am truly grateful and appreciate all of your support. If you'd like to be part of our inner circle or want one-on-one coaching, check out the American Real Learning Academy, where we have self-help groups and courses so you can build the best you. We also have a new Facebook group where you can connect with high achievers from around the world. If you want to go even further, maybe you're determined to write your own book or launch your own podcast, contact me today to see if we could help. You can reach me through Instagram or Facebook, or email me directly at roger@americanreal.tv. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.